Alright everyone, it's time for Occult Literature, video number 245, The Consciousness of the Atom by Alice A. Bailey, an interesting theosophical work, 99 pages, so intermediate reading length. Link in the description of my edition of this work on Amazon, second and third links to my books, blogs, WordPress, and Blogspot if you're interested in Theosophy. Most of it's under the spirituality header. A couple of them went under the academic or mysticism headers as well. This particular work is notable because it contains science and pseudoscience. It's a series of lectures that were delivered. This is an oratory book, a compilation of fairly short lectures that were delivered in New York at the time. It's also, I believe, the first literary work ascribed to Bailey. A lot of her works were channeled and come from later, where it's like arranged in stanzas, and it's New Age material, you could call it after a fashion. It's more like Blavatsky's material a bit. This was by her own hand and is more of a basic primer on the theosophical thought of the time of the atom. Now, some of the things that it claims, of course, are still considered pseudoscience. The idea of the human body being a central point of radiation is not accepted. Humans are not highly radioactive. Radioactivity at the time was considered spiritual, not simply scientific. However, it does embrace an energetic concept of the atom that is now, in modern physics, still debated to this day and becoming more, I think, prevalent over time. It's interesting how that happened, because at the time, of course, the atom was considered very super mundane, explicitly physical. The idea of it having any like energy past what had already been described in the 20s as far as energy, like its kinetic motion, really wasn't accepted at the time. They were still using, I believe, the Niels Bohr model of the atom at the time, with all the little particles moving around on their orbits in a very determined linear manner. And this one, goes quite a bit past that. Some of the content is still pseudoscientific, therefore, but it's all interesting to actually read. One thing you've got to understand, when we're talking about the 1920s, we're talking about a period of rapid technological change, and science and spirituality at the time were totally fused together. If you read any of this, the religious literature mentions science. Scientific literature dwells upon the spiritual. One of the biggest pastimes of polite company back then was to go off to some forsaken wasteland out in the middle of nowhere and to try to study some uncontacted tribe. This was considered entertainment, not just science. It's actually very interesting, the time. If I could visit any decade, and spend a week there, it'd definitely be the 1920s. Yeah, even better than the 80s. Like, much as I would like to see Rambo in theaters and listen to, Duran Duran on the radio, I think the 20s would win out, actually. Yeah, gotta go see some flappers. Sorry. Yeah, gotta go watch some Betty Boop cartoons in the theater. I know, I'm getting badly off topic today. I'm hyper-caffeinated, but this is a very highly recommended work. A lot of you have asked me throughout time about Theosophy, my thoughts on it. I'm not a Theosophist, but I do like a lot of the material. You've got to understand, one thing about Theosophy is you've got these different writers. Dower, Besant, Blavatsky herself, Steiner before he sort of schisms off for Anthroposophy, Alice Bailey. They all have their own little things that they're more interested than others. Some of them were interested in Shakespeare. Some of them interested in the history of Christianity. Some of them in anthropology. Some of them in linguistics. You have all of these different fields spoken of from the same central theosophical core. And so you can sort of look through it. There's no reason for you to just choose one theosophist and say, well, I read this work by Blavatsky, that's the end-all be-all. Theosophy accepted all spiritual and similar studies, and during this era, spirituality and science being twain, you get works like this. I happen to favor them. I think that they're interesting. Anything to do with dreams or linguistics or this sort of pseudoscientific material, I think is quite interesting. Keeping in mind, of course, this is a lecture book. It's an oratory. It's not one single book. It's a series of smaller sections that deal with different subtopics within the concept. The concept is that the atom is a conscious, energetic, spiritual force itself, and that existence goes beyond what was then the described and mundane. Partially accepted today. And, of course, we go into quantum physics and some of the spooky action at a distance sort of stuff. There's a lot that we haven't explained yet. We'll see whether it becomes mundane or breaks our minds once and for all in the future. Again, link in the description of my edition of this work on Amazon. Second and third links to my books, blogs. There are other theosophical works available. You should just read everything, though. Books are one thing that always have tangible value. I've started to collect a few of my own books, but I'm only really interested in the herbals. That's about all. Peace out.